Hi, welcome to Wilmington Weekly with Matt Perky. This is the first of what I hope will become a regular weekend rhythm around here. In my mind, I'm kind of thinking of it as a Sunday episode, although with the holiday this week, I did stretch it out and take some time. But the goal is each week I want to take a little time to walk through what happened at the most recent council meeting, flag what's coming up next, and then, when it makes sense, step back and reflect on those moments and what they tell us about how local government actually works. So this week is a good example of why that last part matters. Before I go any further, I want to be clear about what this is and is not. This is not about relitigating a past controversy, naming names, or assigning blame. It's not about motives or personalities. It's about process, authority, and how power actually works in local government. The podcast exists for people who care about how local decisions get made, even when the process feels opaque or intimidating. And just to be clear, I'm not offering any prescriptions here. I'm trying to make the mechanics of local government more visible so people can draw their own conclusions. Before I get into it, I want to give a quick roadmap for how these Sunday-ish episodes are going to work. I'm going to start with a brief recap of what happened at the last council meeting, then I'll flag upcoming public meetings and community events possibly that you might want to put on your radar. After that, I will take a step back and spend a little bit more time reflecting on how these moments fit into the bigger picture of how local government actually works. If you're just here for the update, you can treat this like a recap. If you want to stick around for the reflection, that's where I'll slow things down. If you listened to the short preview last Wednesday, this will pick up right where that left off. Before I get into broader reflection later, let's go through the recap of what actually happened at the most recent council meeting. So the meeting began with routine procedural items. Council approved the agenda and prior meeting minutes, recognized a retiring council member, swore in the new president pro tem, and approved committee assignments for the year. The meeting then moved into 4 public hearings on separate rezoning requests, each proposing a change from rural residential to light industrial. Although the hearings were listed individually on the agenda, the applicant's presentation kind of lumped them together. It really addressed all 4 properties in one single extended presentation. The presentation process lasted an hour more and focused broadly on the proposed development. No members of the public spoke during the formal public hearing portion of the meeting, and council did not immediately take action immediately following the hearings. Once those wrapped up, we moved into public comment. So public comment, I believe, included 27 speakers. One speaker addressed the possibility of charter government. Another spoke about an education-first approach to addressing crime and homelessness in the city. The remaining speakers focused on one or both of the proposed data center projects. Most comments expressed opposition to the projects. Several speakers asked council to consider a temporary moratorium to allow time for information gathering, planning commission input, and potential updates to local ordinances. Speakers were held to the 3-minute time limit, which was enforced consistently throughout the public comment period. Once public comment wrapped up, the official reports began and started first with the mayor. Mayor opened with a moment of silence in honor of a local musician who had passed away, that he had played taps at 9/11 ceremonies over the years. Then the mayor delivered his State of the City address. During the remarks, he shared personal story involving a historic Wilmington mayor's badge from past generations and noted that he had recently received a new mayor's badge from a local resident as a gift, which he was wearing. He spoke about recent and upcoming business development, emphasizing planning efforts undertaken by the city to position the city for future growth. He also addressed the data center projects, noting the significance of those decisions and stating that they would not move forward without full information. He referenced his statutory role as president of the Planning Commission also in that context. The mayor discussed personnel matters, stating that the city maintains high standards and that sometimes difficult decisions are required. He commented on public discourse around city issues, including the role of social media, and concluded that the state of the city is strong. After concluding the initial address, Mayor continued with additional remarks highlighting city departments and operations, including comments related to water capacity and infrastructure. He recognized multiple departments and shared operational statistics across city services. Auditor Vance followed with remarks recognizing her staff as well. Earlier in the evening, she had also given a presentation during the City Council workshop on governmental accounting, using comparisons to household budgeting to kind of explain the nuances of how public accounting differs from private accounting. I've sat through that presentation in the past, and it is very informative, and I hope the new members of council found it as informative as I did those years ago. Safety Director Eveland also provided a brief report on updates to police and fire equipment. He then addressed federal immigration enforcement, stating the city would cooperate with federal authorities and noting that the city is not a sanctuary city. So, on to new business. There were several ordinances and resolutions. To begin with, Council passed Resolution R2603, which establishes the procedure for the disposal of surplus city property. So we discussed this briefly in our preview. This is kind of spells out the rules of what council does when they want to decommission property. And if it's over $1,000, it will be listed on the website. I believe that you're using govdeals.com to dispose of that property properly. And this resolution spelled out the rules and procedures of how that will happen. Next up was Ordinance 02601. It received a first reading. This is the ordinance amending a prior ordinance that creates city positions. And a new position is in line to be created, including a code enforcement manager. The ordinance will return for its next reading at the February 5th meeting, and I'm anticipating there being a little more discussion than there was at the last. Council also passed ordinances 02602 and 02603, which accepts the streets, lighting, and public right-of-ways associated with the next phase of each development at Creekview and in Timber Glen. Kind of feels like housekeeping, but very important. Those are now being turned over to the city, and additional phases will continue to be built. The 4 rezoning ordinances came next. They were related to each of the parcels discussed in the public hearings. They were introduced and each received a first reading. There was discussion regarding whether to proceed with a first reading at this point, including references to the Planning Commission process and staff recommendations. Ultimately, Council moved forward with first readings on all 4 ordinances. Resolution R2604 was approved. That allowed authorizes the service director to enter into an agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation for construction of the Davids Drive pedestrian trail, with the majority of that funding being provided through ODOT. Next up was Ordinance 02608, a supplemental appropriation relating to the planned water treatment repair that was discussed in 2025, but is now the money is being moved to pay for it. So, and then the last 2. These were ordinances 02609 and 02610. They both received first readings. These ordinances were accepting the annexation petitions for the parcels associated with the rezoning and represent the final process in the procedure to annex property. This is also a good place to point out that while the City Council agenda is available ahead of the meeting, this was a last-minute change, something that I think was added in right before the agenda went out. So always good to make sure you have the most recent updated copy. The council wrapped up with an executive session. It was for the purposes of preparing for, conducting, or reviewing negotiations with public employees concerning compensation and other terms and conditions of employment. So the meeting stopped while council entered executive session. And then came back, and council did take action and pass a collective bargaining agreement. So that was the bulk of the council meeting. It was a very long meeting with a lot of public discourse and a lot of public input. But yeah, I wanted to give kind of a little wrap up here. So to that end, I guess before I wrap up today, I want to also flag a few upcoming meetings. And one community event for the week coming up. And I know there are people out there that like to follow along and keep up with these meetings. They are all broadcast. On Tuesday, January 20th, the Civil Service Commission meets at 4:15 in the afternoon in council chambers. Board of Control comes on Friday, January 23rd at 1 o'clock in council chambers. Monday, February 2nd, busy day. The Park Board meets at 5:30 in the community room on the first floor of City Hall. And at the same time, the Board of Zoning Appeals will be meeting upstairs in council chambers. The Planning Commission meets Tuesday, February 3rd at 4:30 in council chambers. I'm sure that will be a big meeting and well attended. Then on Thursday, February 5th, City Council is back and has a public workshop at 6, followed by a regular City Council meeting at 7, obviously both in council chambers. There is a Records Commission meeting Tuesday, February 10th at 2 o'clock in the community room. And the Board of Control meets again Friday, February 13th at 1 o'clock in council chambers. All of these meetings are open to the public. The agendas are posted on the city's website, and they are recorded and broadcast that way as well. I like to point those out to anyone who has an issue that they're following. Can be a good way to keep up with those. I also want to flag one non-government community event coming up on Friday, this Friday, January 23rd at 7:30 in the evening. The Clinton County Convention and Visitors Bureau and the Wilmington-Clinton County Chamber of Commerce are hosting the annual C4 Awards and the CVB annual meeting at the Murphy Theater. This annual event recognizes individuals and organizations in the community who are making an impact. It's a fun night, and it is definitely something to attend. There are general admission and VIP ticket options available, with more information available through the Chamber and the Convention and Visitors Bureau. Before I shift gears, I want to pause for a moment. When you listen to a meeting like this, it can feel like a collection of unrelated moments. Public hearings, public comments, reports, votes, and then everyone goes home. But over time, patterns start to emerge, not from any single decision, and not from any one speech, but from how decisions are talked about or not talked about. From what gets aired publicly and what stays implicit. That's what I want to spend a few minutes on now. I've been frustrated lately watching Congress seemingly avoiding its responsibility to check executive power, watching legislators defer, stay silent, convince themselves that restraint is the same thing as responsibility. And at some point, that frustration started to feel uncomfortably familiar. Not because situations are identical, but because the pattern is. A legislative body choosing silence in the name of decorum, and in doing so, letting authority drift without anyone breaking a rule. One of the easiest mistakes to make in government is to confuse restraint with responsibility. Legislative bodies often believe that staying quiet preserves stability, that avoiding hard conversations keeps the system functioning. If no rule is broken, then nothing has gone wrong. But authority does not just exist on paper, it exists in public use. Legislative authority is not just about casting votes, it's about setting the terms of debate. When questions are asked publicly, they become shared questions. When concerns are voiced out loud, they belong to the institution, not just the individual who raised them. That public articulation is how legitimacy is built, especially when the outcomes are uncertain or contested. When that articulation does not happen, people outside the room still feel the effects. They may not know exactly what went wrong, but they sense that decisions are being made somewhere else. That is not about trust in any one person. It's about trust in the process itself. When a council chooses not to speak publicly about issues within its own authority, power doesn't disappear. It moves, it concentrates, and it does so quietly. Executives do not need to seize power when legislatures hesitate to use it. All they have to do is fill the vacuum. I also need to own something here. I relied too much on private consensus and formal procedure, and not enough on public framing and shared ownership. I believe that if the process was sound, the moment would often take care of itself. What I learned is that moments do not take care of themselves. Silence feels neutral in the room. Silence often feels responsible in the moment. It feels like not escalating, not inflaming, not overstepping. even when the issue itself deserves public air. I will add this because it matters. Some of these lessons are easier to see once you're no longer sitting in the chair. Distance has a way of revealing how good intentions, procedural caution, and silence can combine to move power without anyone meaning to. That perspective is one of the few gifts that comes from stepping away. Local government is where people first learn what democracy looks like in practice. When councils stop talking out loud about difficult issues, citizens learn that decisions may be happening somewhere else, and that lesson sticks. Democracy rarely fails loudly. It erodes quietly, through reasonable decisions made in isolation, through silence that feels responsible in the moment. Authority does not vanish when someone breaks the rules. It vanishes when those entrusted with it stop using it out loud. So here's the standard I would offer to anyone listening. You should expect your legislative bodies to talk publicly about hard things, even when there's a no vote to take, even when there's no clear answer, even when the discussion itself is uncomfortable. Silence is not stability, it's a choice. And when silence becomes habit, power moves whether anyone intends it to or not. Healthy governance is not quiet. It is transparent, sometimes awkward, occasionally unresolved. That is not a failure of the system. That is the system doing its job. And I'll leave you with that. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back again on Wednesday, February 4th.